so, we always record our sessions so that you have it as a tool to access later on. I am Dr. Lois Parkes, Leadership Development and Institutional Strengthening Specialist with the Caribbean Center for Development Administration. And today, we are going to be looking at a topic that is near and dear to our heart here at CARICAD, and that is building adaptive leadership capacity. And I can see that this is of interest to so many of you because I see at the moment 135 of you who are logged in. And I know there are even more persons who registered, but couldn't be with us, but we know they'll be accessing the recording at a later date once that is available. And just to say a little bit more about the Caribbean Center for Development Administration, popularly known as CARICAD. We were formed 41 years ago. We are an arm of CARICOM, and we are really mandated to support our 17 member states in the area of public sector transformation and reform. And our work is driven and underpinned by the Public Service Charter. And this is a common conceptual framework that all member states have, which can then provide a common philosophy and common approaches to addressing public sector reform and transformation. And so what you are seeing on the screen now is what we popularly and lovingly call our charter house. So we see our public services and reforming it very much like building a house, where we have to have a foundation, which is citizen-oriented public service, because it's really about the citizens that we are serving. And like any good house, it has to be reinforced with pillars, particularly in the region here where we suffer from hurricanes frequently. And so the 6 pillars of our charter are governance, accountability, standards, openness, legislation, and capacity. And so our webinar series are part of capacity building, and you will see on the capacity that leadership is one of the key components. And ultimately, we are working towards ensuring that our public services are results-oriented, resilient, sustainable, and responsive. And so I'm just going to check again. Please give me a green check mark if you are hearing me. I noticed a couple of persons are saying in the chat they're not hearing. And so I am seeing a few green check marks. Thank you very much. So it means that a couple of persons are having internet challenges or audio challenges where they are. Thank you. You can take down those green check marks for me. If you want to learn more about our public service charter, please visit our website at caricad.net. And what this slide shows is just how each of these 6 pillars break down into sub-themes. And so take your time, go on the website. There are lots of documents that you can go through at your own pace to help you to better understand. And you can see how you could apply any of those things to any of your change initiatives that you have going on in your respective public services and organizations. So we are looking at building adaptive leadership capacity. And so I have a question for you all here. And I want you to think about this and typing in the chat for me. Because ultimately, leadership, we can talk about the systems, and we love to talk about systemic leadership. But ultimately, leadership is a choice that individuals have to make. And then if enough leaders make those choices, then what you develop is systemic leadership across our organization. And so here's the question I want to ask of you. Who would you need to be to make the impact you want as a leader? All of us, I believe, certainly people in this learning space, we want to make an impact. And so who would you need to be to make the impact you want as a leader? And if you practice being more of that, what would you do differently? So there's a being aspect of leading, and then that manifests into our behaviors, the doing. So I am curious. Let's give it a moment and have a think. Who would you need to be to make the impact you want as a leader? If you practice being more of that, what would you do differently? So anybody wants to take a stab at that question? There is no wrong or right. There's no judgment in this learning space. If you want to raise your hand quickly and to give it and have vocalize your response, and you don't have to respond to any of these questions, one or the other. So I'm looking in the chat. Ah, there we go. Vera, thank you. I have to be, that's be a leader that has integrity. Somebody who's a visionary, encouraging, sensitive, hopeful, influential, approachable. Thank you for that, Vera. Thank you for that. Kirk says he'd have to be balanced. Oh, yes. Kirk is a very important skill and a way of being that it really takes a certain discipline. It requires us to be prepared to look at, have our blind spots exposed, prepared to step back and really question, am I being objective? Yeah. Julian, hi Julian, empathetic. Thank you. David would want to be a servant. Vakel said, I need patience. Oh yes. Love is patience. Sharon says, I want to be more disciplined. Oh, and I think, Sharon, to be fair, many of us could use a little bit more discipline. And, what I have found is that very often we think, oh, I just need to be motivated. But in fact, if we're waiting to be motivated, that might never happen. What we need is discipline. We should just get up and decide to do what needs to be done. Nicole says respectful, transparent, fair. Yeah. Stephen says I would need to be more mindful, sensitive, responsible, be a person of high character, and inspirational. Stacy, increasing drive and emotional intelligence. Arlene, it says accountability and transparency. J. Yolanda, I love this one, teachable. Every good leader needs to be teachable. We don't know everything. Think about, and one of the things they're going to come to looking at as we talk about adaptive leadership is that we don't know everything. Hence, the need to build that capacity around us. Erica, a great listener. Indeed, that is one of the competencies that we focus on in our leadership program. We call it listening as a leadership competence. Simone, open to criticism. Indeed. Simone, feedback is a gift. So Makeda says she wants to strive to be more true and authentic. Many people sometimes are afraid to showcase who they really are. That's so true. Michael says creative. Janelle says more proactive, more innovative. Kaylin, more organized. Melissa, to be more assertive. Russia's boldness, take risks. David, Sammy, my Trini brother, critical thinker. Stacy, encouraging, being a true mentor. Cecilia, flexible, emotional, intelligent. A couple of people, Trevor, Mary, so I want to talk about listening. Hi, Renee. Renee from cohort 16, transformationals. All our cohorts have, they give themselves their names, yeah. Open communicator, who is empathetic. My tongue is twisted. Empathetic. Yes, I got it. And objective. Thais. No. Share information, says Trevor. Lynette said I need to be more upfront, frank in addressing issues. So thank you all very much. I mean, you have really been typing here. Yeah, listening, understanding the impact of being a servant leader, optimistic. A lot of people talk about optimism. See, nobody wants to be working with, following a leader who's negative, right? I love to talk about leaders being those who bring into existence that which does not yet exist. In order to do that, you have to have a vision for the future, and you have to have optimism that that vision can be realized. So optimism is important. Atlee Rodney, hello, Commissioner of Police in um, Antigua and Barbuda. No, people, let me pause to say, sometimes we think that you're very senior, so you can't attend any training session at all. But here are some people who are telling you, no, I can make a little time for my development. And Atlee has been somebody who's almost always at our webinars. And there are other senior leaders who are here. So a lot of times junior staff say, oh, they never come. That is not true. We're seeing it here. So I want you to really sit with this question, not just right here in this space. You'll get the slides later and you'll see that. And I want you to, if you do something a little odd, print off that one and put it on your wall. Take a picture of it and have it in your phone. But this is something that I think every now and again, as leaders, and I believe we all are, we need to ask ourselves these questions. Who am I being as a leader? And how is that manifesting itself in what I am doing? So, we talk about adaptive leadership. Now, folks, you will probably have heard about different forms of leadership, different theories of leadership. And we don't really want you to get overly confused about these various definitions. But leadership theories tend to, by and large, fall in 4 brackets. And so I think all of us, the leadership we don't want is that kind of authoritarian type leadership where people believe that they're like dictators. I remember when I joined the public service very long time now, not so young again, and I had a boss who described himself as the Don of the public service. Yes, there's that type of leadership. We don't need to question how we feel about it. Then there's a transactional leadership. And we have found from research that we have done across the region on leadership, that unfortunately, a lot of the leadership that we see in our public services falls in this bracket, where we're doing the work, we're very much focused on the day-to-day transactions and operations, but not much beyond that. Then there's a transformational leadership. Now we're really getting into some nice meat here. And really this is about, as the name suggests, transforming, being able to pull teams together, being able to envisage a different future. And it's really about change leadership. Now, adaptive leadership takes that up just a little bit now. They're really quite similar. But the distinction here and why we think it is so important for today's context is that an adaptive leader is one where they have to balance between a number of things. It's about setting clear direction and expectations. It's about empowering others to solve problems and to generate solutions across lines of traditional authority and within an ever-evolving environment. So the adaptive leader understands that they are working in intense complexity. Pandemic times, hello, we are all working in an ever-evolving environment. Just think about from the time the pandemic started, it really took on life March of last year, and all that has happened until now, and how things are just ever evolving. And first it was this way, then it is that way, then there was just one variant. No, I've actually lost count of how many variants we have, etc., etc., etc. You know, and how it is affecting not just healthcare, but education, logistics, import, export, you know, international travel, tourism, and the list goes on. And you can also recognize that clearly, while you still need traditional authority, you know, somebody has to be in charge. We have authority structures for some reason. We have to have the rule of law. But responding in this ever-evolving environment means that you have to have multi-sectoral responses. You know, anywhere where people start to take a silo approach and say, this is my turf, mine. You know, there's little children and they don't want to share their toy, mine. No, that is not going to work in how we can effectively and truly respond. We have to actually generate solutions across lines of traditional authority. We have to empower others to help us solve our problems, right? We have to tap into resources that we don't normally tap into. I think one of the greatest examples of this I saw since this pandemic was, I remember in a particular part of the United States, they were having serious challenges of managing, you know, particular vaccine sites. You know, they were crowding and it was just chaotic. And they actually called on a fast food restaurant, Chick-fil-A, that is renowned around the world for their exemplary customer service. And the people from Chick-fil-A were able to take what they knew and learned about delivering customer service and to apply it to the management of a vaccine site to create good customer service experience. These are some of the things we're talking about, right? We have to understand that we have to adapt and empower others and think outside of our silos and understand that we are operating in an environment that is forever evolving, it's complex, there are many factors at work. So we're talking about building adaptive capacity. And this actually I took from a workshop that I did, which was really targeting people at the permanent secretary level. But understand that if you're a team leader, this is for you as well. But because I do know that we have a couple of accounting officers here, and many of you at some point might become an accounting officer. What do we mean by that? It's a very public service term, usually defined by, you know, the fiscal rules and laws that govern in the public service. But it really is talking about the fact that that person is the person who is truly accountable, mainly for, you know, the budget, the management and the expenditure under that budget. But it's more than that. And so we just wanted to, just in this slide, just to talk about the complexities of the role of this type of leader, this level of leader. And they are responsible not just merely for the budget, but leading the development and implementation of policies around a set of portfolio and sectoral responsibilities. They have corporate and strategic responsibilities, so that under that the fiscal management falls, but other things, the human and physical resources. They have fiduciary responsibilities. They usually have to report to Parliament, and in some countries, they have reporting responsibilities to other constitutional authorities, for example, a public service commission. And they also have other collective responsibilities for cross-cutting and dynamic mandates. That happens at the national level. So many countries have things like our committees of permanent secretaries or permanent secretaries boards. Many persons are serving, you know, in regional teams, maybe a subgroup under CARICAD with CXC, other regional bodies like PAHO. A lot of that has happened, you know, especially with the, you know, the regional response to the pandemic, and internationally as well. So the role is really very, very, very extensive, right? So how are you going to do all of this? And the reality is, I was trying to find, something that was a little more than no man is an island, because, there are men and women in the world. But you get it. Many of you, maybe you grew up hearing this song, no man is an island, no man stands alone. You cannot do it alone. Leaders, let me go back to the previous slide. All of these responsibilities, you see them there? There is no way you can do it alone. That's why you have teams. And so, if you are, and then a lot of people tell me all the time, well, Papa, you can talk, the people that I have, they don't have the capacity. I can't delegate to them, so I have to do this alone and that alone. Now, we get it, there are capacity gaps on many of our teams, in many of our organizations. But I tell you, as leaders, one of your responsibilities is to build that capacity. Hence, this webinar title, Building That Adaptive Capacity. You have to build leaders around you, a team around you, who can actually help you to navigate these ever-evolving circumstances that we are faced with and the complexities that we are dealing with. So Tashana makes a point here, and that she says, yes, there are capacity gaps, and sometimes there's an unwillingness even when the capacity is available. And if that is so, Tashana, you have to ask yourself, why is that so? And so adaptive capacity, I'm telling you, it's not just a technical competence. It is also to create an environment where people are more inclined to be motivated, feel like their contributions matter, and they feel like they have a vested interest in it, And so when you're building adaptive capacity, it's all of that. There's a holistic approach. It's not just the technical competence. All right. So when we talk about adaptive capacity or capabilities, there are a number of elements to that, which I'm going to share here on a couple of the slides. So one is the knowledge of the organization, right? Do your people know their organization? Do they understand it as an ecosystem bound together by a common purpose? But in fact, there are differences, Do they understand that there is, that their agencies, including stakeholder groups, that they overlap, but they have their own unique characteristics, okay? So, for example, if you work at the Ministry of Finance or the Accountant General's Department, that organization is a part of a whole ecosystem that is making payments and providing budget to the entire public service system. And they're all interconnected, but yet, Ministry of Health has its unique characteristics different from the Ministry of Education, etc. Do they have that knowledge? You would be surprised how many people work in our public services and don't understand the public service. And so sometimes you are wondering, why are the people so lethargic? Why don't they get it? What have we had the onboarding, the orientation, so that people understand not just their little area of work, but they understand the organization as an ecosystem and how the different parts work together. Because if people don't understand, then it affects how they serve their clients. It affects the importance or lack of importance that they place on their jobs. The second capability here is the willingness to project into the future. And that's very critical. So remember earlier I talked about the transactional type of leadership. Transactional leaders tend to be about what's happening in the here and now. And while we do need to understand and deal with the here and now, but adaptive leaders are looking into the future. They try to get ahead of the change before it happens because they take the long view of impacts okay? They are willing to consider longer-term strategies, even despite, my friend Julian, I'm sure he's jumping up and down at this, despite the short political cycle. It's an evolutionary approach rather than just looking at short-term results. Because if you take, for example, let's take the field of education. It matters not who is in power, which party is in power. Education will remain as a necessary function. And one of the things I have observed with the pandemic and many schools across the region having to, start to deliver education virtually. There are some schools that did it far more seamlessly than others. Why was that? When I checked it out, all of these schools were not just waiting for a pandemic to start to equip their teachers in how to deliver education virtually. They had already done that training. They had already put in place systems because their leaders were projecting into the future. The third capability here, breaking down barriers. And that is so important. An adaptive leader needs themselves and their team not to be so turf oriented. They're not just focusing on their organization, they're focusing on the big picture, right? They're looking at championing across the enterprise. The fourth capability is being disruptive, right? And that goal is also looking ahead and being willing to project into the future. And so this is really about privileging outcome-focused goals and principles above all else, even if they require major changes to organizational norms and sacred cows. And I'm sure many of you can point to some sacred cows that you have, but it's being willing to change. The fifth, being agile to get to the goal. And so this is recognizing that if we're using this method, and this is what we normally use, and no, this is not going to work, then can the organization, can the team be agile enough to adjust mid-course, to try a different approach, because that is what is required. The next one is empowering the organization, and that is really about allowing your team to take decisions. It doesn't mean you're abdicating responsibility, but it's a de-emphasizing of hierarchy and silos. And the last is that ability to sense and to respond, right? It's really, a lot of it talks about emotional intelligence. That is a large part of it. But it is really holding true to their understanding of people and themselves, right? And considering what are some of the deeper impacts of the decisions that we're trying to take? What are the gains? What are the losses? That's a willingness to do some self-check, some introspection, and maybe working through your own barriers and biases in order to reach to the desired outcome. So here is this slide. It's entitled Appreciative Inquiry, and this is a principle that we use in a lot of our leadership development programs. And this is an approach to problem solving, where we are focused not on what is going wrong. A lot of times we do that. What is the root cause of this problem? And while there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but appreciative inquiry seeks to look at what might be working well. So it is really engendering a positive dialogue. How can we discover what is happening here? Whether it is a leader, whether it is in a particular team, a particular service or system. Why is that working well? What are they doing that's different? And so from that, we can then imagine how could they apply those lessons to the vision and the issues that we're tackling. So we're dreaming and therefore designing accordingly and delivering. And so how do we build adaptive capacity? Now, I could say to you all, tell me about the worst person you ever worked for as a leader, the worst team leader, the worst manager, supervisor you ever come across, you ever worked with. And we could go to town. But you know what? We'd end up probably with hypertension. All of us would relive all the horrors that we experienced under this leader. But what we are asking for is to take an appreciative inquiry approach, yeah? And so it's really taking lessons from previous encounters with people who you knew and you experienced as adaptive leaders. So you want to build adaptive capacity. So one of the things you can do with your team is that you ask them that question. You could probably put them in breakouts, in trios or pairs, or you could do it as a, as a group. Think about somebody who you believe to be an adaptive leader based on, the definitions that we just described. What are their attributes? What did they do that you think constitutes them being called an adaptive leader? What impact did they have on you, on the team, on the organization? And how did they build adaptive capacity in their team? How did they do it? I see that, Tashana, I see that. So I am curious. Anybody would be willing to just raise their hand and tell me about somebody who you believe to be an adaptive leader? And, what were they like? What did they do that caused you to, describe them as an adaptive leader? How did they build capacity in their team? So I'm looking for a volunteer, just a quick show of hands. Just one. So everybody has gone shy on me. So Patricia is saying she should call somebody, Janetta Paul. So Patricia, when you were having the audio problems earlier, let me see your hand. Wait, so Faye, I see your hand. I'm coming to you. Oh, the hand came down. All right, David. Go ahead, David.
Oh, I was just going to say what I had written in the chat. I was just saying an adaptive leader to me is continually assessing the situation at hand and making adjustments or decisions to either improve the situation or make things better for achieving the goals of the organization or even the well-being of the persons under his care or the organization as a whole.
Okay. So you don't have to call a name, but have you ever actually experienced, such a leader?
Well, I think especially during this COVID time, I think most of our leaders, especially in the public sector, are being forced to some extent to be adaptive leaders. Even if you don't think you are, you are.
David, I'm asking a different question. Have you, David, you yourself, ever worked under a leader that you said, no, this leader, I really think they were adaptive?
Yes. Even my present CAPSEC is very adaptive.
So how does she, and I know you're CAPSEC, how does she build adaptive capacity in her team and in the cabinet office?
Right. For example, the whole issue of digitalization.
Yes.
We realized, for example, we were spending a lot on resources like paper and so on, even before COVID, and trying to find a solution that can save time, limit the use of human resources, for example. We sort of adapted the digitalization of the cabinet procedures. For example, on a Friday evening, we would spend so much time trying to put papers together for cabinet meetings, having it delivered. Now everything is done virtually. Submissions are done online. The dissemination of those papers to ministers are done online. And the meetings to some extent goes quite well. And that is an example of adaptation with
indeed. Thank you so much, David, for sharing that. And I would certainly follow up with you to hear more about some of those innovations that are taking place. Thank you so much. And I see Tashana had her hand up. Tashana, I am coming to unmute you. So Tashana, have you experienced somebody, a leader who you believe to be an adaptive leader? All right, Tashana. Okay, unfortunately, Tashana's microphone doesn't seem to be working as well, unfortunately. So you could share in the chat, and a lot of people are sharing the chat. Especially Atlee says yes, he has actually witnessed quite a few of these adaptive leaders, normally in the time of disaster response, like from the RSS and SEDEMA. Yes, indeed. I'm happy to say a number of leaders at RSS have done our leadership program. So I am not surprised. I'm glad to hear of it. And so, Raphael, if you just help me out, am I missing any hands? Yes, I think Erica. Hello, Erica.
Hi, is that Erica? It's Clive.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, so what happened is, sorry, let me apologize. I think I'm using her thing because my email.
No, it's okay. It's okay, Clive.
Right. So yes, my leader is actually on here. He's in the meeting.
Great.
Yes, Stacey and Lindsay. Hey, boss. So I'd say so we work with children. We work on the road a lot. And one of the things that we need to devise is so we can be able to document the conversations that we have, the interviews, take pictures and stuff. We had cell phones that really never have any data on it. We had to be putting credit on, or would get a little bit of credit for the time that we would be using the phone. One of the things that she lobbied for was for us to get tablets. So when we go on the road, instead of carrying our computers, to go there and talk to the clients, or go there, write, and then after write again, what she did, she ensured that the team got tablets. So when we go out, we could talk to the clients, write while we talk. Also, we're able to see the cases while we're there. So we receive them on the tablet. So we go out and we were able to reduce the amount of paper use that we're using. So we just use the tablet to do everything that we do. This is just one aspect of the many ways she has adapted to the changes that's happening before COVID, during COVID. She has recreated some things. She has created some things that when it has helped us to grow, to work more efficiently, and basically achieve more. And
okay.
Sorry, just to add, I can't leave this off.
No, it's fine. Thank you so much, Clive. Really glad to hear. You notice, there's, his leader, so many attributes, but the one that jumped out of me is, not afraid of change. Love it. Esther.
Hi, Lois.
Hi.
For me, I have to go back to my days at Parliament. And I will call her name. She's one of our CLP alumni, Ms. Sampson.
Yes.
She really encapsulates this term adaptive leader. And the part that really jumped out at me from what you shared earlier is getting ahead of change. She had a very clear vision of what she wanted the Parliament to be. She, for those of you who may not know her, she's the clerk of the House at our Trinidad and Tobago Parliament, and very visionary, very clear in terms of what she's seeing. But that willingness to project into the future was always something that drew me. And so even before things happened, she projected into that, put things in place. And I remember at one point we were unicameral, we were only one house, and she had this clear vision in her mind. We would have simultaneous sit-ins. And, I remember sharing with someone that this was the first time I saw an organization where the strategic plan was like a living document. And you actually saw it unfolding before your eyes. And that is because of her willingness to not just project into the future, but to build others, and recognizing that as a leader, she cannot do it herself. So flattening the organization, breaking down barriers, and definitely no fear of being disruptive at all. Mrs. Sampson is well known for being Mrs. Sampson. And I learned so much from her, and adaptive leadership for me is the way to go, following the examples that I have seen.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you so much, Esther. And I mean, I have had the privilege of actually going there on hand, almost like a fly on the wall, and you just see the team at Parliament. You know, the Trinidad and Tobago Parliament, the staff, they're empowered, they can problem solve, they have all of these leadership tools that they use, like second nature. No, indeed. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, well, not Erica, it was Clive. You can take down that hand. And then we're going to just move on here. And so, why am I asking you to do this? You know, ask these questions. And you can use these with your teams as an approach to start to think about adaptive leadership. And it really is the fact that you recognize that leaders, these kinds of leaders, they do exist, you know, they do exist, and you have experienced that. And that creates a basis for people to tap into that experience in order to then move on to the next level in terms of building adaptive capacity. And so having generated those discussions around adaptive leadership and what it is that adaptive leaders do practically, drawing from people's own experience, then you start to think now to go a little deeper. And how do you develop your own strategies for building adaptive capability? What does it look like for your particular team? And it's recommended, clearly you can't take on the whole world all at once, even though all of it is there at your feet. But if you're talking about building adaptive capability, you want to start incrementally. You know, you're not going to transform everything upside down, 180-degree change, you know, in a week. But identify a policy issue and one adaptive capability that you think the team needs to develop. And remember, we spoke about these adaptive capabilities here, yeah? Remember? There are 7 of them in all, right? Which one of these would be important to develop? What's missing right now for the team to be able to be, you know, have more capability in addressing that particular policy challenge, right? And so I am curious, and you could just type in the chat. Think of your own organization. What is a policy challenge that you're currently dealing with? And what could be one adaptive capability that would need to be developed, that if that was developed and applied, the team would have a greater capacity to start to tackle this particular policy challenge, you know? So I could think of, like, for example, one policy challenge is for many countries, I know certainly in Jamaica, it's about quality of education, particularly when schools are delivering education online, you know, and a policy challenge that we've had is that some children have not been logging in. They have just gone missing out of the education system. So that is a major policy challenge. How do you get children who are, you know, falling by the wayside back into the education system, being educated, yeah? Actually, you know, the government vaccination mandate, you know, that's another challenge for public sector workers, you know, and so there are many of these. And so when you look at the issue and sit down with your team, what adaptive capability, which one of them you might want to focus on, you know? And so let me go back to that. I'm using that same example of how do we get children back into the education system. And it seems to me that we would definitely, one of the things that you'd have to be agile. So the business as usual approach to engaging students and their families and their guardians and their parents is not going to work for getting children who are falling out of the system back into the system. And so it seems to me that agility, willingness to find different ways and means and non-traditional ways of engaging with those students and their guardians and family is going to be important. Yeah? So continue to think about that. What is that policy challenge that you have, and which adaptive capability would be needed in order to be developed in order for your team to be better able to tackle that policy challenge? And so here are some discussion questions that you and your team could ask around this. So if you're talking about knowledge of the organization, you might want to ask, how can we deepen our understanding of our organizations and its ecosystems? If it's about willingness to project into the future, you have to literally in your teams ask the question, what longer-term strategies for change, future trends, environmental factors do we need to consider despite short political cycles? What are those strategies for change and future trends that we need to consider? You know, so I can recall that, and many of you I'm sure can relate, that we have been tinkering at digital transformation in our public services for a long time. But unfortunately now it's kind of just thrust upon us because of the pandemic. But organizations that have been systematically been projecting into the future and seeing the technology and constantly adapting it and integrating it and trying out new ways of working, we're able to adapt more easily. So I can use, I'm not ashamed to say, our own organization, CARICAD, we developed that capacity for remote, virtual delivery of training prior to the pandemic. And because of that, even though we were doing face-to-face training, we're able to transition quite seamlessly to not only delivering virtual training for all of our capacity building programs, but to also use that to adapt our processes for all of our technical assignments that we engage in as an organization. Breaking down barriers, how could we improve collaboration with peers in other divisions and other entities that affect our operations and our clients? And so we have to be deliberate about what are the barriers and how can we collaborate? How can we break them down? In terms of being disruptive, how could we develop a greater capacity for leaders to make changes to long-standing processes or policies? Sometimes we think it can't be changed, but have we really asked the question, what might be some new ways of working and how could we do it? We have to ask the question before the change can come. Here's some others. For being more agile to get to the goal, how can we become more agile, more flexible to respond to new information and policy shifts? Because new information is coming daily. With this pandemic, yes, new information is coming and coming and coming. How can we engage different levels of our organization and across organizational boundaries to bring about collaborative and cross-functional problem diagnosis and solving? The ability to sense and respond. What strategies can we employ to assess the impact of change on ourselves and others, and to effectively address barriers and resistance to change? And so a lot of times we don't get into the zone of adaptive leadership because we have not been deliberate in engaging our teams and asking the questions. And this is just really giving you a template to begin that discussion, and you'll be surprised if you're open to it and you start to engage your team, what ideas could emanate from that. I see a response here in the chat from Adelaide Pat. As you say, we have, and she's really talking about some of the underground challenges with students turning in assignments via the online learning platform. And here's the reality. Building adaptive leadership capacity is not an option. We don't have an option. Okay? Just like how we say, digital transformation is not an option. It's not something we can opt to do or not to do. Building adaptive leadership capacity is not an option, given our current and future policy realities. It is a must, my people. And so we have a little time, and I would love to open the floor to questions and comments and suggestions at this time. And so I see where Hillary, welcome Hillary, is responding to that challenge about children turning in their assignments via the online formats, and asking some questions to point to some suggestions there. Okay, I think Tashana's hand is up from earlier, but we weren't hearing her audio. Tashana, let me see. Hello, Tashana?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Yes, we are hearing you now. How are you?
I'm well. Good to be here.
Yes. Any comments or questions you have regarding to this topic?
I'd just like to say that it's very meaningful at this point in time. Even as, I work with semi-autonomous agency, so I'm not full public servant.
Yes.
But recently we would have gone through restructuring, right? So I think at this point in time, the information being shared here is very useful as we try to adapt to the changes to effectively carry out our mandate.
No, indeed. Thank you, Tashana. No, it really is not an option. And you know, one of the good things, you can take down that hand, Tashana. One of the good things that certainly we have seen at CARICAD is that we have seen that continued and even growing interest in leadership development, because it is recognized that if we don't build our leadership capacity to be able to handle the complexities that we're dealing with, we are not going to have success. Anything successful that happens, whether you think it is good or bad, anything that succeeds, it succeeds because there is leadership that is driving it. So Atlee is asking, so Atlee, there are a few words missing from your question, but I think you're asking, so how do we get other leaders to see it as a must, especially those who are old school? That's a deep question. That's a deep question. No, and I'm just speaking from my own experience. One, there might be some people you'll never convince. And so you have to understand where is your sphere of influence and work in that sphere of influence. Know what you can and cannot change. But the other thing too is a lot of us, when we are trying to persuade others, especially those of us who are very HR focused, HR is our background, so you know we think learning and development is everything. And so we think other people think the way we do. And sometimes what we need to do is to phrase it in language and in terms addressing concerns that they have. They have to see what is in it for them. And the example I love to give was when I was Chief Personnel Officer in the government of Jamaica, we needed funding for a leadership development program. I'm happy to see my boss here, I believe, Mr. Devon Rowe, Executive Director for CARICAD, but at the time he was Financial Secretary. And so we had to enter into negotiation with the Minister of Finance to get the necessary funding. Now, Mr. Rowe was hard to convince, but, you know, as Financial Secretary, he's not dealing with all the nitty-gritty details of what we're doing. And so now dealing with other staff in finance, who are very wonderful people, but very finance-focused. And like, why does it have to cost so much? Why? And so I thought about it, and I said, okay, let me tell you why. And I had to come up with a different way of getting to understand the impact. So there was a very celebrated case of a leader who shall be nameless, who had taken the government to court, somebody who maybe wasn't properly developed, wasn't properly selected, got into a leadership role and ended up having to be removed and became a long legal battle. And so I calculated what were the legal costs incurred by the government just to relate to this case. And when I did the calculations, comparing to what we were asking to train, I think at the time was 25 leaders, we spent more money on this legal case than what we want to use to train these 25 people who, as you know, once you train leaders, it's a gift that keeps on giving. That was when my finance focused colleagues, that is when they got it. Okay, that's why it is worth the spend. That's why that is a good return on investment. And so sometimes, athletes, we have to be able to speak in terms that, you know, people who are not as HR minded as us can understand. All right? I see a hand here, Venice Ricketts Burton. Hello.
Hi, are you hearing me?
I am. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Paz. Thank you. All right, there's 3 areas that I would love for you to just expound on for me. And the first one has to do with I think it would have been your slide 16 in terms of adaptive capability. I just want you to explain more on 1, the being disruptive, 2, the ability to sense and respond. And then the third thing that I would love for you to expound more on is which I like, is appreciative inquiry.
All right. Okay. So, lots of questions there. Thank you, Venice. So it's being disruptive, ability to sense and respond, and appreciative inquiry.
Yes, thank you.
All right, I've got it by George. All right, let me start with the being disruptive. And maybe it is easier to explain by telling a story. This is not my story, but I remember hearing this story being told by a man about his father. And his father had just gone to a rural church, very traditional church, you know, where the families buy the benches and you sit in your bench because your family bought the bench. And so the father felt, no, but the church cannot grow this way because it's become very exclusive rather than inclusive. And so the father decided to be disruptive. And so he called his son. The son was the one telling the story. And said to the son, we're going to pull the benches out of the church. And he pulled out all the benches and the father lit them all afire. No, that's disruptive. But no, I'm not suggesting here you go burn down your building or do something, you know, so out of the stratosphere to get yourself into trouble. But it is that willingness to say, if there, a lot of times we have some processes that we are doing them that way because that's the way we've always done them. No, maybe 50 years ago that made sense. Today it doesn't make sense. And so why are we doing it this way? You know? And so you go and map a lot of your business processes and you will see, I've seen working with people using BPR approach to coaching and helping people resolve certain organizational problems. Things are just, papers are just passing from this one to that one to that. Nobody making a decision, you know. But it has to, because it's tradition that the PS must see it, then the deputy PS must see it, then the senior secretary must see it, then the assistant senior secretary must see it, before I go down to the officer who's actually going to work on the document and serve the client. So it's that ability to say, no, just because we have done it this way all the time doesn't mean it makes sense anymore. The ability to sense and respond, that is really about, no, you might think that has a lot. You might say, you know, billions of projects in the future, you might think, but isn't that the same? Not quite. That ability to sense and respond, it is more looking at the people factor of things, okay? And it is that ability to understand how things affect people. So just yesterday I was having a discussion with somebody about our COVID response, and that in the Caribbean, most of us have gotten a vaccine. We had to get vaccinations in order to go to school. Who gave you those vaccines? They were your community health, public health nurses. You know, those are the people that's who we used to, these are the people we interact with to get our vaccines. And yet, we see many countries seem to have missed that. And so, in some cases, you know, the community health system was kind of left alone and out of the COVID, you know, response vaccine rollout process, you know, and so this now has become a problem in some countries. Luckily, people are catching this now, but recognizing that, you know, actually the citizens are used to the public health nurses, and they don't really know the CMO, but they know the nurse, you know, in their community, who lives in their community, you know, who they probably share meals with. They are probably better purveyors of information on the vaccine than the CMO, you know. So it's really understanding those little nuances. It's really people intelligence that you're looking at. And it's not just understanding people, but understanding yourself in the process. And what might be some of your own biases that you need to be careful of and realize, and, you know, be deliberate in overcoming them. The last thing I asked about is appreciative inquiry. So, and I share another story to explain that perhaps a little better. Sometimes in the literature you see it referred to as bright spots. And so many years ago in a Southeast Asian country, there was a particular disease that was breaking out. And a team from WHO had to go in, and they were given a mandate to, you know, address this matter in 6 months. And they're like, how are we going to do that? You don't know much about the disease, why this is happening, etc. And so rather than taking let's find the root cause of the problem approach, they decided to say, okay, are there any villages in this country where people were not having this problem? And they found a village. This village, this disease was not evident in that village. And so they decided to appreciate, go and see why is this village not having these problems? And in studying them, asking the questions, the inquiry, yeah, and appreciating what they are doing, I realized they had a different methods of food preparation. And so what they were able to do then is discover a way of addressing the problems in the other communities. And so they partnered with this community and got them to teach other communities how to use their methods of food preparation. And in fact, they met the target of eliminating that disease in 6 months. That is the power of appreciative inquiry as a problem-solving tool. Thank you so much for that. So I see a lot in the chat is going on about the problems around virtual online school. Great. There are lots of people here who know more about it than me. Good. Great. Any other questions? No, if you could, let me see the phone to make sure. Am I missing any hands here? Well, in fact, we are almost at the end. You know, time flies when we are having fun. So I'm just checking if there are any other questions here. And so, just to say that we are going to be sending you the slides and the link to the recording. We will convert this to a YouTube video that we will upload as well in the future. And I just really want to thank you all. And when you get this slide, I mean, we have just really tried to share just a simple methodology that you can use as leaders to just start this adaptive leadership capacity building process in your teams. You don't have to change your whole organization necessarily, no, but you can start small. You can start where you are. So thank you all for coming. And just to share a couple of announcements with you before we go. So our next webinar will be next month, October 5, same time, 9:45 Eastern Caribbean time. And we will be partnering with our colleagues from the CARICOM Secretariat, and they'll be sharing on the CARICOM Monitoring, Evaluation, and Reporting System. So you don't want to miss that. They have shared in other webinars with us before, and for those who don't know, CARICOM is rolling out results-based management systems across its regional institutions and across its member states. And so this is really the platform that they're using to help to underpin and to do the monitoring and assessments and evaluation, and to really automate, the reporting system that we are all going to be using in our member states and in our regional institutions. So you don't want to miss that. So Shauna is asking about information about our courses, and so I'm just going to put in the chat our email address, info@caricad.net. You can email us to get some more information about our various courses. At the moment, our call for applications are now open for our Leading Change workshop. That is going to be delivered in January, and the deadline for applications is October 29, 2021. It is not free, but very, 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 very good price of $1,500 US. And so email us at info@caricad.net. You can see on our website as well at caricad.net more information on that. And I'm seeing all your thanks in your in the chat. So thank you. I appreciate that you have spent the time to be with us. And we are going to send you the link to the recording as well. So I'm going to just invite Raphael now just to upload our poll so that we can get feedback from you on this webinar. How did you find it? Any suggestions that you have? And please do, if you want to have us at CARICAD come in and to do more customized work with your team on, on leadership capacity building, or if you're interested in any of the other services that we offer at CARICAD. We offer a range of technical services to our member states and its organizations. You can go on our website to see what those are, and we'll be happy to work with you. So once you have completed the poll, you're free to exit the session, and please do look out for the advertisement for our next webinar. Share with others. It's always free. Our webinars are free, and the fact that so many of you, I see 193 people or so, were in attendance today. Our webinars are good, if we do say so ourselves. So, once again, thank you for coming. Thank you for your engagement, and let's keep in touch. Visit our website, subscribe via our website to get our newsletters, etc. All the very best for the rest of the day and for the rest of the week. Stay safe.